And I'll start out by saying I'm so sorry. I don't have my real bugs with me today. I went to the one stream that I had time to stop at was too flooded to go in. So I don't have anybody that's live, but I will be passing out these really cool like preserved specimens. So that we can check better. It's not great, but it's a worthy substitute.
We appreciate it.
So thank you guys for coming and anybody listening on the recorded Zoom call for tuning into the Watersheds and Macroinvertebrates presentation. You're going to learn about what a macroinvertebrate is. You're going to learn about why they're important and why they're threatened in New Jersey and how we can work together to protect our bugs because they're super important. So I am Liv Stutler from the New Jersey Watershed Ambassadors Program. Unfortunately, AmeriCorps has been defunded, so some of the information on this page is a little bit out of date. We are going to be funded through the rest of this term through the state of New Jersey, through the Department of Environmental Protection. But after that, who knows what's in store? My host agency is the Musconetcong Watershed Association. These wonderful groups of people are focused on preserving the culture and the history and the future sustainability of the Musconetcong watershed. So definitely check them out if you're interested in any of those things. And my program, just a general overview, we do stream assessments in New Jersey to monitor the water quality and fill data gaps for the NJDEP. We promote watershed stewardship. We go into schools and we bring educational programs to scout groups. And then we also do collaborations with nonprofits and community organizations to do like trash cleanups and stuff like that. So what is a watershed? Does anybody know what a watershed is? What is a dog shed? If a dog sheds, what happens? Is there hair that comes off? Maybe a dog sheds hair. That's exactly what our land does. Our land sheds water into one space. So if our water's falling on the mountains and it's falling in this lower area over here, all of that water is flowing into our rivers and into our streams, and it flows down to the lowest point. So that could be a lake, it could be a pond, it could just be a river, and that flows into a different river. But that's the idea, is that all of that water has to end up at the same place, which means that it could be coming from here, or over there. It's ending up at the same place, and it's covering a lot of land as it goes. So that could be a good thing because it's taking water from one place to another, but it could also be a bad thing because the water can take things with it. So everybody lives in a watershed. We are in the Musconetcong River watershed. So all of our water that falls here will go into tributary creeks and streams or directly into the Musconetcong River. The Musconetcong River then flows. Oh, we are in the upper Delaware watershed. Things out of order. So the Musconetcong River flows into the Delaware River that flows between New Jersey and Pennsylvania and goes all the way down into the bay and into the Atlantic Ocean. So this is our watershed management area. This is like my assigned region. There's one of me for every one of these regions on the map, but ours is the best. Number one is the best region, always. We've got the Musconetcong, the Pequest, the Pollenskill, all of these smaller Delaware River tributaries, and it's beautiful. We have a lot of preserved space. We have a lot of wonderful small cities and towns. I think it's the best watershed. All of my coworkers are sick of me saying it, but then they come up here and visit and they're like, this is amazing. Like, I know. So why do we care about it? Why do we care about our watershed? Why do we care about these little insects called macroinvertebrates that live in our water? And the answer is on the next slide, but it's because we depend on it so much. We get, I want to say for the Highlands region, which is kind of this swath up here, we get about a third of our drinking water in in all of New Jersey from this region.
Oh, wow.
So it's super important that this water stays healthy and preserved and protected because so many people downwards in the state and over really rely on it as a source of drinking water. And we recreate in it, we swim in it, we use it to fish in. A lot of people will get it for, like the Musconetcong River will fill in aquifers underground for showers that we can use and all that stuff. So we use it. Nice. So super relevant to I'm so glad. Sometimes people attend these presentations and they're like, I'm from Kansas. I don't know. This doesn't matter.
About 2 acres of
Wetland.
wetlands.
Nice.
Cool.
Nice.
Designated by the Watershed Association.
Oh.
So I will.
Amazing. Amazing.
Very cool.
Well, kudos to you, because I know that is frustrating as a property owner when you want to put up a shed and they're like, no, you can't, it's on wetlands, but
Yeah.
it is
Or a
really
pool.
important. Or a pool.
We tried.
A lot of regulations. So thank you for owning that property and being interested in protecting it, because wetlands are ridiculously important.
I shouldn't have put my oil in there.
Gold paint thing.
Don't tell me that.
Bears do love it. That's because the one downside with the bear was
They
love
do.
them.
They do. I mean, it's perfect
You know,
habitat.
backyard.
Bang a pot during that. They run away.
Yeah. Oh,
I mean, kids make noise. Bears don't like noise.
Yep.
So you're on the right track.
I'm not sure if you know. That's why I come here.
There you
Right
go.
here in
There
the
you
backyard
go.
by myself with my kids.
So, in speaking of negative impacts that humans can have on the environment, we can have pollution. So, pollution is just anything that shouldn't be introduced to the environment because it's harmful or it just doesn't belong there, which can be many things. So, oh, fancy transition. Point source versus non-point source pollution. Point source is something I can point to and say, this is what it is, this is where it came from, this is how to stop it. Non-point source is either it's got so many sources that you can't pinpoint where this exact like particle came from, or it's just so diffuse throughout the watershed it would be impossible to find any exact sources of it. Like our road salt on our roads every winter, it would be impossible to take a sample from a stream and say this road salt came from this road upwards in the watershed. Impossible, which also makes it a difficult problem to solve. So the Upper Delaware watershed's biggest problem, no surprise, is non-point source pollution. We have a lot of agriculture and a lot of pets in this area. We have a lot of industry, both new industry and historic industry. So we've got a lot of different problems that can make it a little bit complicated to remove all pollution from the watershed. So for this one, we need to talk about what a stream is and what it looks like and what it should look like and what it shouldn't look like. So this is a pretty decent stream. We've got riparian vegetation is anything in that zone right from the bank a little bit up from the water. That's really wooded. I like that there's trees. I like that there's a mix of vegetation and stuff. The stream width is okay. We want a lot of curves and bends in our stream, so we don't want them to be too wide. We've got woody debris that's going to provide lots of habitat and resources for our macroinvertebrates and our fish and anything that lives in the water. We've got beautiful canopy cover like over the Muscatine Pond River that is going to shade out our water and make it a little bit cooler and a happier place for our fish. There's a difference in the streams in New Jersey. In this region of the state, in the upper state, we are in high gradient streams, which is also called a rocky bottom stream. There's a lot more large boulders. We've got mostly gravel to boulder size and in between rocks in there. Whereas South Jersey is a lot lower gradient, it's a lot slower moving. There's not as much oxygen in the water because it's slower moving and it's a little bit warmer. And these places are a little bit swampier. They're a little bit muddier. You step in, you kind of sink down. Rocky bottoms are where it's at. I like the rocky bottom streams. I would rather twist my ankle than sink into the mud. And that also means that we have different species that live there in these different streams, and we can't judge a high gradient stream based on low gradient stream criteria. So this is just oh yes, did do it right. This is our beautiful regions of New Jersey. I could not find that word for some reason. We've got the Ridge and Valley up way north. Those are really high gradient streams, very gorgeous, very beautiful, very preserved up here. This is also part of like the Delaware Water Gap up in the Highlands and the Ridge and Valley. So lots of mountains, clean water, beautiful. Piedmont is where we start to get into agriculture down in Warren and Hunterdon County. And then we've also got this swash that goes over towards the city. So that's a little bit more influenced by our industry and our development. And then intercoastal plains and outer coastal plains are kind of the same thing in my brain. They're not, but I don't live in South Jersey, so I don't remember most of what they do. So basics of streams, we've got riffles, runs, and pools. Riffles are that really rocky section that kind of looks like a little mini waterfall. There's lots of bubbling happening. It's aeration. There's oxygen being introduced into the water. That's usually followed by a swifter section, maybe that's a little bit disturbed with the speed of the water, but it's going to be quicker moving, just a little bit deeper than a riffle would be. A riffle would be a little bit more shallow. And then our pool, if these are side sections of the stream here, our pool is that really deep, really slow moving, almost looks stagnant. It's going to be a little bit warmer at the top because it's not moving, but down at the bottom, it's going to be cooler because it's insulated from the sun. So those are really important because riffles are where that oxygenation is happening. If we don't have any oxygen in our water, nothing can live. So the riffles are important, but it's important that they're broken up by these other habitats because there's some insects and species that want to live in pools. There's some that want to live in runs. There's some that need to live in riffles where that oxygen is the highest. So it's important to have a good mix of both. And then this is an interesting diagram depicting erosion and sedimentation. Eroding from this bank as the water flows over, and then as it turns the corner, it's depositing the sediment, so deposition on this bank. And this is a normal cycle for streams. This is what they're supposed to do. But when we build roadways right next to them and we like them to be straight and even and not disrupting anything, we don't really like when they move. And the problem right now is with our storms getting busier and busier every year, we're having a lot more water dumped all at once. And that first place that water goes is into a smaller stream or into the river where that erosion is being exacerbated. So not to be doom and gloom. Now we're going to talk about bugs. And I will hand out this way. This way.
Thank you.
So we've got our beautiful charts here, and this is an easy way to help us identify our bugs. It's called a dichotomous key. Dichotomous is just meaning that there's two choices every time you go down a rung on the ladder, and it can help you figure out what you're looking at if you have never looked at the bug before. Very useful, very cool. We might use them a little bit later. And then the other side is just a size chart. There's a lot of different bugs, and they can have a lot of different shapes and sizes to them. So it's important to be able to use our resources to figure out what they are. So benthic freshwater macroinvertebrates is a really big fancy way of saying bugs that live in freshwater on the bottom of the stream. So benthic is bottom dwelling, freshwater is our streams, our lakes, our rivers, our reservoirs, everything up in this corner of the state is freshwater. Once you get out towards the coast a little bit, you get into brackish water that's a mix of fresh and salt, and then out into saltwater. So I ignore saltwater marine macroinvertebrates because I don't know anything about them. Big, meaning macro, no microscope needed to see them. And invertebrates just means it doesn't have a backbone. So we are not invertebrates because we have a backbone. So why do we care about these little bugs? And the answer is they can tell us things. I don't like to say that something always has inherent value to it. But these bugs are really important because they can give us information about how healthy the ecosystem is. So if they're in what's considered a group 1, would be a pollution intolerant insect. Those are our mayflies, our damselflies, our caddisflies. These guys need it to be very, very clean. They need a lot of oxygen in the water. They need the water to be cool. So if we see this group, that's a really good sign. Group 2 is pollution sensitive. They can tolerate some pollution, but they're not going to be found in areas that have a ton of salt or a ton of pesticides or if the water is really, really warmer than it's supposed to be. They can make it half of the time. Group 3, and I don't like that group 3 is in red here because group 3 is not a bad group of insects. Group 3 just means that they can tolerate a lot of pollution. They're pretty tough. They're pretty hardy. Those are our leeches, our midge flies, our black flies, our kind of gross, squirmy guys that can really tolerate. They would be happy if you put them in a bucket of sludge. And they're not bad. They're not meaning that the water is polluted automatically because they're there. They're just able to survive everything else. So those are our last ones standing. We want to see a mix of all 3 of the groups because that means that our biodiversity is high. We have a lot of different food sources for other creatures like fish and birds. We don't want to see just group 3. Well, we don't want to see just group 1. Just group 1 means it's a very delicate ecosystem that could be disrupted by the tiniest of blows. We don't want to see all group 3 because that means that something could have happened in the past or is happening right now. So we care about macros because they indicate the water health and pollution. That's kind of our first step. If I go out and I do a biological assessment and I see everything looks good, we've got a good mix, no worries, we're good. But if I go out and I'm seeing only group 3s, a lot of midge flies and not a lot of other species, that can be kind of an alarm bell for us. So we can go out and do more further intensive, expensive testing that maybe you don't want to do on every single stream, only the ones that are indicating problems. Some of them actually help us keep our water cleaner. So our filter feeders like clams and mollusks that bring water in one side and spit it out the other, they're actually cycling the water through their bodies and removing pollutants and cleaning the water. So they're really important in moderation. They're important in moderation.
Yeah. Zebra mussels.
Zebra mussels. Such a scourge. They're also a food source for all of our fish and birds. They're kind of like the basis for that whole food web. Because our fish most of the time are going to be eating some kind of macroinvertebrate, or they're eating the algae that the macroinvertebrates help grow. Our fish eat our bugs all the time, but they also eat, our birds eat our fish, and the birds also eat the bugs. And then other things eat the birds, and so on and so forth. So identifying them can be pretty cool because sometimes it's really easy. Sometimes it is just, this has gills on its abdomen right here, and it's got 3 tails. So it's got to be a mayfly. Sometimes it's a little bit more difficult, and they can look really similar to other species. These are also really blown up pictures. So they are actually usually only about that big. So it can be a little bit more difficult. And most of what we talk about when we talk about macroinvertebrates is their larval form. So these guys are babies in the water. Once they emerge, they'll be kind of like this guy. Most of the time they emerge and they have some sort of wing. These guys are really annoying in the spring because they come out all at one time. And if you live anywhere near the water and you turn your garage door light on at night, they cover the side of your garage and they're nasty. But they're really pretty in the water and they're really cool to watch move because they swim in a really neat way. These guys are pollution intolerant. Stoneflies are even cooler than the mayflies. This may be my favorite macroinvertebrate of all time. These guys have these hairy little things under their arms. These are their gills. So their gills are not on their abdomen like on a mayfly. They're under their gills. And when I take these samples into schools and it's in a stagnant bucket with not a lot of oxygen moving around, they start doing push-ups because they're trying to get water to flow through their gills under their arms. So I tell the kids, this is how you identify this bug right now because they're the only ones doing push-ups right now. If I had to do push-ups to live, I would immediately pass away. Not be good. Damselflies kind of look like dragonflies. It's in the same family. These guys are really cool. They've got really thick tails that make it easier for them to move in the water. Also pollution sensitive. There's our dragonfly. Now watch this cool video. This is awesome.
That is really cool.
This is called a labial mask. And it's like you could unhinge your jaw, reach out and grab your food and bring it back to your face. And you wouldn't have to move your hands at all. They're very cool. They are, yep. In entomology, we call it the mouth part. So that mouth part is a labial mask that reaches out. It's just so, I could watch it all day. It's so cool.
That's when it's in the larval form?
Yep.
Okay.
And it can technically bite you with this. So these are ones, I have a specific list of insects that I remove from a sample bucket if I'm bringing it to show in a presentation or in a school. And that's one of the ones that I will remove and show people separately just because they technically can bite. Caddisflies are one of my favorites. There's different types of caddisflies. Net spinners are in group 2 and case builders are in group 1. These guys will actually take stones and leaves and twigs from the bottom of this stream and build themselves a case.
That's really cool.
They use silk out of their mouth and they build a case. It is the coolest thing ever.
Wow.
I've
I've seen that before.
I think this is the one I have. I'm going to pass that down. It's so cool.
Oh.
They're so awesome. There's actually people on Etsy that will raise these in aquariums and give them precious stones to use, and they will build themselves a little case out of precious stones. And it's kind of sad because then they boil them to kill the bug, so they have the little case. They make jewelry out of them, which is kind of cool. I wish they didn't kill the bugs, but they're just like, they are such smart engineers because
Hmm.
these will blend into the rocks. It's dependent on what the substrate is around them. So they'll blend in perfectly with the rock so that their prey, when it walks across the rock in front of them, has no idea that they're there. It's pretty awesome. And then when they're out of their case, if you catch them out of their case, they are like a squishy little caterpillar with no defense at all. And our net spinners have this beautiful hardened shell on their thoracic region that actually acts as armor and protects them. So these guys will build a net, and I wish I had a picture of it because they're actually really cool. They'll build a net between stones or sticks in the stream, and they'll actually be able to catch their prey that way, kind of like a spider.
Oh wow.
Pilgrimates are another one I removed from our samples because they are pretty bitey. These huge mouth parts are called pinchers, and they will pinch you and hurt. Very good for water quality because they are a huge favorite of bass and trout. So a very good indicator for fishermen. Alder flies, I used to give this presentation and say that if somebody found an alder fly in my sample, I would give them $10 because I've never seen an alder fly in New Jersey. And this year, I can say that that's not true because I found an alder fly last year.
So not $10.
Might actually happening. I know. Because we get so excited. They'd be like, oh, thank you. You'd be like, that's a mayfly. I'm sorry. Find it later. He's in there somewhere. But they're really cool. They're really small. They kind of are a little bit ugly when they come out as an adult, but they're interesting enough to look at. Riffle beetles are one of the best indicators that we have for water quality. They're kind of hard to identify. This is super blown up. They're actually, like if you look at the white of your pinky nail and have that again, that's how big beetle is. And the larva is like half that. So they're pretty small, but these guys spend their entire life cycle in the water. So our other guys will emerge as larvae and leave, and then they're really not dependent on the water quality anymore. But these guys are dependent on the water quality their entire lives. So very good indicators if you see them. Water pennies are one of my favorite. They literally are little suction cup beetles that stick onto the rocks. Not much else to say about them. Water snipe flies are really creepy and alien looking, and they become the most boring housefly ever. But these guys are really neat, and it is by law in New Jersey, if you are a watershed ambassador and you see a snipe during your sample, you have to scream snipe in the middle of the woods. Absolutely have to. Crane flies are another really weird aliens looking species. They've got these weird called spiracles on the ends of their body that kind of look like tentacles. And then they become this thing that looks like a mosquito, and everybody freaks out that it's a mosquito. But they're actually, they don't have mouth parts that can bite us. So I would much prefer a room full of crane flies to a room full of mosquitoes. They're a little bit bigger and a little bit creepier, but I'll take them. Black flies, the grossest, in my opinion, of the macroinvertebrates. They hold on to the rocks with this end of their body, and they just kind of wiggle there like a weird little, I don't even know what you would call that shape, bowling pin. They're kind of creepy. They will grow in masses across rocks, especially in the summer when the water level goes down a little bit, it gets a little bit warmer. An important food source for a lot of our creatures that live in or near the water, but I don't like it when I reach for a rock and it's just 12,000 of these guys. The little, I'm not easily skeeved out in that one. That will skeeve me out. Mitch flies are really tiny. They look really gross when they're blown up this large, but when they're really small and they're just kind of wiggling around, I think they're kind of cute. Also pollution tolerant. These guys are pretty tough. You'll find these in pretty much every stream in New Jersey. Scuds are the best. They're weird little side swimmers. So they swim, they're flattened on their side. So they kind of swim like shrimp. They're just really weird to look at, and kids are so fascinated by them, and I so wish I had brought my bugs today. Sow bugs are like the opposite of our scuds. So these guys are flattened on their side. These guys are flattened top to bottom. So they kind of look like a little pill bug. That's our equivalent in the water. And we've got crayfish.
Hey, crayfish.
Crayfish is a crowd favorite. This one is not the rusty crayfish. That's our invasive. We actually only have 1 or 2 native species of crayfish that are being outcompeted for resources by our invasive species. But these guys
Where are the invasive species coming from?
It depends. There's a couple that have come from like when ships take in water to balance their loads and then they dump it whenever they like come to port. That's called ballast water, and a lot of our invasive species come from ballast water. So that's probably where part of where it started. But people releasing pets and exotic pets that they have and then they grow or they don't want them anymore and they dump them. That's a lot of where we get our like invasive aquatics from, unfortunately. These poor guys. So not their fault, but out competing our natives. This is always the slide that everybody goes, ew, when I'm in a classroom. We don't have leeches that are that big in New Jersey. This is kind of a blown up picture. But our leeches only really get to about the size of a quarter, maybe a little bit bigger.
Big enough.
Yeah, big enough to be like, but not big enough to drain a human being to flood. I know that one.
Okay.
Worms kind of look the same as like an earthworm if you saw it out of this is like a really, really blown up picture. But they're also important food sources for a lot of species. So pollution tolerant, but we want to see them in a small amount. Now there are differences in snails, and this blows people's minds sometimes when I tell them this. I'm like, that, and not every snail is the same. There's different species, but there's also different anatomies. So gilled snails are the ones that have gills. They're really great because the gills need dissolved oxygen in the water to be able to breathe, and they will open on the right side if you have the
That's
point up.
Crazy.
These guys are lunged snails, and they will open on the left side. And I always have to go, lunged is left, gilled is right, because it's not an L. I can't tell my left and right still. I'm 24 years old. It's ridiculous. These guys are pollution tolerant because they have lungs, so they can breathe out of water if they need to. So if they need to come up and get clean air and then go back in the water, they're fine. So these guys are a little bit in between. We also have a number of gilled species in New Jersey. Not all gilled snails are good. We have them in the Musconette Pond. We have the New Zealand mud snail, which is only like the size of your pinky nail, if that. Most of them are smaller. And they are a gilled snail, but they are incredibly invasive. So they're becoming a big problem.
So do lung snails have to come out of the water to breathe, or
No, I believe they have a certain ability to either store water in their
Okay.
cell or breathe some amount of water from
Okay,
or some amount
gotcha.
of air from the water. And this is just an example of a lung snail. There's also, they don't all look like this spiral. Some of them are also classified as lung snails. They can be like the Gary's from SpongeBob snail. They're
Okay.
kind of like
Yeah.
right spiral.
Gotcha.
Or like it's called a limpet, where they're just like they look like half a clamshell.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of different kinds of lung snails, and they're not all bad. Some of them are really good. They're important species, but so that's the end of our introduction to macroinvertebrates. This is a key that we have that we can look at and try to figure out what this guy is. So we can go through and maybe this will work, maybe it won't. Sometimes it does. So the first question is, does it have shells?
Yes.
Oh wow, look at this. You guys cheered.
Eating. It does have legs. This is the most frustrating PowerPoint ever. There are 3 pairs of legs.
Why is it like undoing it?
It's so dumb. There are 3 tails. And it has a mayfly, yay! And it's not a damselfly because we see the gill on its abdomen. Respect. You jumped right there. So I stole this presentation from another ambassador and I've yet to fix it, so none of these line up. So what can we do to protect these guys? First of all, we can use less fertilizers or no fertilizers and chemicals in our landscaping. The less we use, the better. And responsible use is the name of the game. You can use it and it can have very low impact on our sources of water, but you have to do it right. So I like to rag on my grandfather when I give these presentations because my grandfather is like old school farmer. I'm going to do what I'm going to do and no one's going to tell me how to do it right. Does not read the instructions on the back of his bags, does not do anything that he's supposed to do. So
Your grand. You might have another grandpa.
gotta read the bags. So when we add fertilizers and stuff, we want to do it not right when it rains, because that's just gonna wipe it all out into the times I've explained that to him. He's like, no, I'm gonna do it whenever I want to. I'm like, but you're wasting your money. I'm worried about you financially for this reason. We can use the fertilizers and the chemicals at the proper time in the proper amounts to maximize their effectiveness because they are important tools. We use them on our farm fields. We use them to keep our crops safe and our food supply solid. But we have to use them correctly or it's going to wipe out all of the beneficial insects that we're trying to protect that are also helping our food sources stay solid. So we can clean up after our animals as well. Nutrient pollution is a huge problem in our watershed. So I had to kind of start practicing what I preach because I would just go, my dogs are in my yard. They can go to the bathroom and it can stay there and I don't have to worry about it. But while it disappears from my yard in the rain, that nutrient load is going somewhere else. And I live adjacent to wetlands. So that's where all of that excess nutrients was being funneled to. And wetlands are great because they're really good at fixing nutrients and taking them up and kind of cleaning the system. But I was contributing to overload of that system. So it's a good idea to remove all feces from our farmsteads and from our homes.
Really just dog food?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've never thought about it this way, but if every single neighborhood or house in your neighborhood had one dog, I can't remember what the number for household was, but it was like an insane like tonnage of dog food every year. It's crazy. It really truly is. Another thing we can do is leave the leaves as long as possible. There's also I hate when people are like either leave every leaf and don't move it ever. And I also hate when people are like, every single leaf off of the yard, we can't do it. Because neither of those are sustainable ways to go about it. There's always going to say we've got opposite ends of the spectrum. Either way is not sustainable because for a certain amount of time, we want to leave the leaves. But it's also for aesthetic purposes. It's for access. Maybe you don't want to be slipping and sliding on slimy leaves that are shaded that are never drying out. Leaves can also kill your grass in certain areas. So it's important to manage that and to figure out how we can best use them on our property, but also not remove them entirely from the system. So I've started doing what's called leaf towers, where you have like a cage in the back of your property where it's just like a cage of fencing, a circle that you can fill with the excess leaves that you want to clear off your paths or out of your yard that you're accessing. And that can leave all of that for the insects and all of those beneficial services, but it gets it out of the way.
You put the leaves in the wetlands?
There you go. There you go.
Oh, that's what I do.
I mean, that is, as long as it's your wetlands, you're good. Leaving it in somebody else's wetlands is dumping, but not leaving any soil exposed. So using exposed soil areas to plant native plants, to sow native seeds is a really good way to prevent sediment pollution. Dirt in our water is still a really big pollutant. It's not one we often think of, but dirt is still a big problem. If we all of a sudden filled this room with smoke, none of us would be able to breathe or live for very long. And it's the same thing if we put a bunch of dirt and a bunch of particles suspended in a stream with all of these other creatures that need the oxygen. So if we have erosion management methods in place, so we're not, again, my poor grandfather his ears are ringing right now. If he clears a field in the back of his property and then just leaves it there, and then all of that rain comes and moves the dirt into the stream that's right next to his field, that's going to be a really big problem for everything that lives there. So planting either placeholders, anything with roots is a good idea. And using biodegradable soaps outdoors. This is one that I just added because my mom went out and was about to like start using like the most heinous car cleaner on her car. Wait, I have biodegradable soap inside. Anything that's gonna break down faster. Also taking your car to the car wash. I used to say only take your car to the car wash. And then I realized how expensive it is to take your car to the car wash. And that made me angry. And even sometimes they don't dispose of the water in the way that they're supposed to. So making sure that you're washing your car or your deck or your pool at the right time to not push all of that pollution right into the watershed is a good idea. Anything biodegradable is going to be better than anything not biodegradable. And trying to find maybe like natural alternatives to some of the chemicals and stuff that we use outside. I just found we had to seal our deck, and I found like something that was supposed to not create those toxic fumes after like a couple hours after you applied it. So, and some of those products are absolute hoaxes, and you really have to do your research, which is really frustrating when you only have so much time in your day. But even little decisions like that can add up if everybody takes a community-minded approach to it and makes like a couple changes. Not everybody has to change their entire lifestyle to be, as my grandfather calls it, crunchy granola people. What else can we do? We can talk to our neighbors and our community members. You guys are doing fantastic job. You guys are exposing these wonderful children to this kind of way of thinking. But not a lot of people have, maybe they work at this time of day and they can't come to presentations like this. Maybe they were never exposed to this through their education, through their schooling. So it's really important to talk to other people about it, learning about the environment, everything. We can't protect what we don't know or what we don't understand. So learning all of these different things is important. Join your local watershed association. The Muscatine Watershed Association is always looking for members. They have lots of awesome, wonderful activities throughout the year that you can join in on. So lots of benefits to being a member as well. My little shameless plug. And embody what you see. I would go on these very environmentalist, bleeding heart rants. And unfortunately, I wasn't following all of my practices. So I had to take a good look at what I was putting out into the world and what I was saying and realizing where those things don't align and finding ways I can align them better. And then remaining dedicated to practicing tolerance is a note that I added to this presentation recently because I was finding it was very difficult to have conversations in different spaces. And I think it's important that as environmentalists, you remember that not everybody's going to think the way that you do. Not everybody is going to care about the things you care about. And that's good, because the more different perspectives and ideas and thoughts that we bring to the table, the better everything is going to be for everyone. So while you have to practice tolerance, and obviously we have to hold people accountable for their actions, if you're dumping toxic sewage into the stream, oh my God, I love that one from Christmas Vacation where he's dumping all of his raw sewage into the drainage pipe, but that drainage ditch goes immediately into a nearby waterway. So we have to make sure that people are held accountable, but we do have to practice tolerance because not everybody is going to have the same opinions, but that doesn't mean that we should sacrifice any of our dedication or our attention. And that is the end of the presentation. If there's any questions, I would be happy to answer. Oh,